Okay, well, welcome everybody to the March 8th Legislative Committee meeting. I'd like to start by recognizing today is the International Women's Day, and March the 8th. It is a global day of celebrating the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. And I want to just reach out and congratulate all the women that have been on council in this town. Councillor Rudick had a lunch for them today, and all but 2 out of the 9 were here. One passed away and one we just can't seem to find. But it was a nice day, and it was nice to see all the previous lady councillors that came out, and I thank them for their contribution to our community over the last number of years, and our community is a much better place because of the people and what they did when they were on council. So, do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, Your Worship, for joining us today. And again, I just want to thank those councillors and Mayor Mackenzie that had served on this council before. They've made this community better for their work, for the previous citizens, the current citizens, and for the future too. And out of the 9, by comparison, we've been incorporated since 1906. There are a lot of other councillors that have been on this council, so we'll continue to seek to have equity and diversity on this council. So thank you for all of our allies and all of those that have worked to make Vegreville better.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on. So looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Is there any additions or deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Do you have something, Megan, you want to put on? Okay. Next up, adoption of the minutes of our last regular legislative meeting. Councillor Warwa makes the motion. Any errors or omissions within those minutes? Seeing nothing. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. First up, we have a delegation from ATCO, which is always nice to see one of our partner companies in our community come in and make a presentation to us. So could you all introduce yourselves, please?
Yeah, I'm Nola Davis. I'm the customer sales representative from Lloydminster.
Perry Flown, I'm operating supervisor for Lloydminster under the Lloydminster district.
Yeah, my name is Hard Sokol. I'm the regional manager for Central East, so that's Vegreville all the way to Lloyd, and then Vegreville to Cold Lake is the area.
Thank you.
And I'm Vic Barr. I'm the new supervisor here for ATCO for operations, looking after Lloydminster, Vermilion, and Vegreville.
Oh, nice to meet you.
You too.
How are you finding the area?
So far, so good. We're just working on moving my family here. So.
Where did you come from?
From Grand Prairie.
Oh, this is a lot better than Grand Prairie. Good for you.
Less skag.
Less Muskeg.
I know the mayor of Grand Prairie. I'll probably hear something about this. So that's fine. Okay. I guess we'll introduce ourselves too, so that way you know who you're talking to. We'll start down here.
Hi everybody, Chris Leggett, CAO for the town.
Gerald Emco, Councillor, Town of Vegreville.
Justin Curtis, Councillor, Town of Vegreville.
Tanine Rudick, councillor.
Tim McPhee, mayor.
Tina Warwa, councillor.
Len Bullock, councillor.
Megan Saskew, Corporate Services Director.
Dale Lefebvre, Infrastructure Planning and Development Director, and I've met Nola before.
Phil Rowe, the Director of Community Services, and we've met before too.
And those are the people that do all the work, and here's the people you're going to be contacting, so we'll start over here.
I'm Sandra Lang, the Legislative Coordinator.
Jamison Brown, Marketing Communications.
Okay, there we all know each other, and everybody has a role to play in this organization. And after your presentation, we'll probably have a few questions, and then we'll have a discussion later. And then one of the management group will probably get back to you and tell you it's way too much, but then we'll just negotiate it. Is that how you guys do it?
You just have to be careful because too much is actually this way.
Okay.
Too much, you might be okay this time.
Well, I just wanted to know that, you know, like everybody to feel comfortable in the room, and there will be some questions as we move along. Are you guys okay with that during the presentation, or would you like just the questions at the end?
No, absolutely. Anytime. If you have a question, please feel free to ask.
Okay, so go ahead, take her away.
Okay. Thank you very much for having us here this afternoon to talk about our LED streetlight program. So we'll go to the first slide if we can. So the first little bit just talks about ACO and LED technology and why we've adopted this technology. There's a safe, viable option for the communities. And as the LED technology has evolved with ACO on the forefront, we started LED conversions or changing to LED heads in 2011. Go to the next. So we're finding now that LED streetlight heads are on par or better than new HPS heads. They have lower energy consumption and other environmental benefits. They are dark sky compliant, which is better for wildlife. They light up zero light pollution, we are finding with the LEDs.
Zero?
For light pollution, they light
Yeah.
the street lights
But
and
they,
point
yeah,
down.
okay, so, okay.
Yeah.
But zero, that's quite a target,
Well, I
wow.
should say, yeah.
They're actually lighting up the streets like they're supposed to do.
Yeah, but
rather than
it's,
the
the,
skies.
it's above the light and stuff that we're talking about, right?
There, above the lights,
Yeah.
there is no light pollution, so the light comes straight down and it doesn't do the light pollution above the lights.
Nice.
Next slide. So with the benefits of LED, they improved energy efficiency and cost savings. They have a longer lifespan than HPS, like we anticipate up to 100,000 hours. They have reduced maintenance and operating costs. There's no warm up necessary, and again, they're dark sky compliant, which means it's better for night animals or whatever for flying around. They do reduce the carbon footprint of the community. And we believe, or it does say they have unsurpassed lighting performance and visibility to light the street light. Or the street. So this is just a color rendering of what is available for LED heads. Our current standard right now is 3000K. So we're in the middle. And these ones also will help us sleep better at night because there is not so much light pollution. Next one. Yeah. Yeah. So LED are now available to customers for any type of outdoor lighting. They'll be utilized exclusively for new residential developments or streetlight projects. We have stopped purchasing HPS heads and HPS bulbs, and that is mainly because we are no longer able to procure those. It's getting harder and harder to procure the HPS. We do or have applied to the AUC to offer this LED multiplier conversion program, and this program is available on all invested streetlights. Next slide. So this is just a little screenshot of what our current Philips LED head looks like. So when you drive around the community, there is some already located in the town of Veg, and you'll notice that's what they look like. Next slide. So this slide just talks a little bit about the environmental and cost savings compared to, go back, there we go, for a 100 watt HPS versus a 38 watt LED, and what the cost savings are with energy savings and CO2 reductions. Next screen. So this is some of the LED heads that we can offer right now. There's the roadway lighting. We do have LED security and flood lighting and decorative davits and LED top post heads. Next screen. This is just a rendition of what an HPS is on the left-hand side versus an LED, which is on the right-hand side. So LED has less light pollution, and it's a more whiter light than the HPS. Is there any questions on that? Nope. Go to the next. Next slide.
I do have a question, actually, since we're supposed to jump into the middle.
You bet.
The LEDs are for 100,000 hours. How long were the HPS performing? How many hours?
Good question, Dale. We can get you that, but definitely not that well, cause we're seeing maintenance costs go down, and that's the changing light bulbs and stuff. So it's definitely better, but we can get you the actual number. I don't have it on top of my head.
Savings is gonna be important when you're making decisions, so I mean,
And that'll be in here, the cost savings there.
So we can go to the next slide. So this presentation is strictly gonna speak to invested versus non-invested streetlights and what the difference is between the two rates. So there is two types of streetlights in your community, of course, the non-invested and the invested rate. All streetlights are owned by ACO, and there is an option outlined in the franchise agreement that pertains to the streetlights and how they pertain to invested and non-invested. Next screen. So currently on the non-invested streetlight rate, ACO installs, owns, and they're maintained by ACO. They're the lighting fixtures. However, the customer is responsible for the full cost of the installation, and the customer is responsible for the full cost of replacement. They include maintenance only, and that is things like temporary repairs. So if there's an underground break that is not covered under this, that would be charged to the town to fix those underground breaks. And of course bulb replacements, which we're running out of bulbs. The 61E rate is no longer an option or available to the town of Veg. Under the franchise agreement, all brand new streetlights will be under the invested rate. Next slide. So for the invested streetlight rate, it's lighting fixtures that are installed, owned, again, and maintained by ACO. The customer is responsible for the full installation cost, but you will receive investment from ACO to offset a portion of that installation cost. Once the light is on the invested rate, ACO is responsible for the full cost of replacement, maintenance, repairs, everything. There's no further charge to the community other than operating charges, like the energy usage charge. Next screen. So currently, right now, our invested streetlight rate option, and this is based on a 100-watt HPS head, is $35.59 is the monthly wires charge, in comparison to the non-invested 61E rate, which is $20.71 a month for monthly wires charges. Next screen. So this just kind of goes through all the different wattage options or whatever there is. So 100-watt HPS invested is of course $35.59. Non-invested is $20.71. And then it goes through all the different rates or options for lights. Next screen. So this is right now a summary of the lights that are within the town of Vegreville that are non-invested. So you currently have 291 non-invested streetlights. You have 830 streetlights in total. So of those, 291 are non-invested. So if we were to take those streetlights and move them to the invested rate, your new monthly charges for those lights would be $10,487.01. The difference of that rate per month compared to the non-invested is $4,330.08. Because we can offer you investment on those lights, the investment would be $287,342.13. So if you were to move those lights from non-invested to invested, ACO would pay the town of Vegreville the $287,000. If all you did with that investment check was to use it to offset the higher rate, it will cover that higher rate for 67 months. And at present, we average end-of-life replacement for these lights is around $6,000. So on those 291 lights, it's anticipated that eventually it'll be $1.7 million to replace those lights, the cost.
That's if they stayed on the non-invested rate,
They stay on the non-invested rate.
once they hit end of life.
Yeah, correct. And next slide. So this is a summary that you have 291 non-invested streetlights right now. So you're approximately, you pay $6,175.65 per month in distribution charges. Approximately 1.7 million in future replacement costs when those lights hit end of life. The future, if you moved all those lights to invested, you would pay $10,487.01. There is available investment provided to you of $287,342.13. There would be no future capital cost replacements. And those lights would then be eligible to be on the LED multiplier and convert to LED. And next screen. Is there any questions on that? Yeah.
What you just said there is they would be eligible, so you wouldn't convert them to LED until their lifespan is out for the current ones, for those
No, we can
291?
convert them to LED once they're on the invested rate.
Yeah, the LED conversion program does not work unless the lights are all invested.
Yeah.
But the bulbs, if they become invested, then they would automatically be changed to LED immediately, or?
Not to LED, they'll go into the invested rate, so you guys wouldn't be responsible for end-of-life costs. But the LED conversion is a separate beast, so there's two programs here. There's moving the lights that are non-invested into invested. Okay, we give you money as if we're investing in those lights. The rate goes up based on what she had there because you're no longer responsible for it. It's all built into the rate. Then the LED conversion is a different beast. Once it's all invested, then that LED conversion can come in, and that's when the multiplier comes in.
Okay,
Which is a different presentation.
okay, so I was jumping ahead. Thank you.
Yep, no, that's fine.
Okay, so before we go too much further here, the non-invested lights that we have now, on average in a year, what are we spending in repairs and stuff on the 261 that we have?
There was data testing that was completed in, I believe, 2019. And the structures at that time that failed were $50,000 less investment. So that was charged to the town in 2020, 21. If it's a non-invested light right now and the head does fail, the community does have the option to pay for that head and leave the rate on non-invested, and they're running about $800 for a head. Or you can say, we'll just move that light to invested at that time, and then there's no investment, no charge.
So that's end of life. I think the question is how much roughly in maintenance?
On ours, Dale, do you know what we're spending?
Yeah, we're budgeting 22,000 for 2022 for some replacements that we know are coming up that are failing, and then 2 years ago, we did spend about 25,000.
And then non-invested, when there's a problem with the light or with the pole, usually if somebody hits it, it's insurance company that pays. But is there any other maintenance that ATCO does for us that sends a bill?
Yeah, potentially there might be maintenance that's not non-replacement, right? You know, as we were driving in, there was, Perry, we seen that the wires were running overhead, right? So those are temporary fixes.
Overhead fixes.
Yeah, so there's permanent fix underground that needs to happen, which has nothing to do with the davit or the street light itself. So, I don't really know, but do we know roughly what we've seen in the past and how much money we've been spending on maintenance that's not replacement costs?
We haven't done, I do know we did an audit 2 years ago, and we're gonna be doing another one. There's approximately, just for the non-invested lights, about 29 underground repairs that need to be done. So we can for sure complete an audit and get that cost to you, so you have an estimate of what those are. And those will involve sometimes boring under the road and digging up the concrete for sure.
So if they stay non-invested, they go underground, ATCO will do this service for us and send us a bill for it.
Correct.
If we go to invested on these, like you're proposing, we have ATCO does that work, and there's no bill to the town.
Correct.
It's easier to budget. You know what your cost is. You're strictly operational costs. There's no maintenance costs. There's no end of life replacement. You could have a high load come through here and knock down 5 lines or 5 poles. something like that, everyone knows about it, the insurance company would usually pay for it, but you wouldn't believe the hit and runs that we see like in the bigger city of Lloyd there. So by being all invested, they say, okay, we went 1,000 lights, here's our monthly cost, here's our yearly cost for streetlights. They don't even worry about when they get hit, cause it's not their problem.
Yeah.
You have no liability of nothing with it.
You had a comment?
Yeah, ultimately, you know, I think that's like, the town is gonna go all invested eventually. So it's either the town ends up over time paying 1.7 million to get there. Cause they have to get replaced one day, either end of life or someone's gonna hit them, right? So that's 1.7 million, or here, that's what I was saying, here we're saying, here's $250,000, we'll take them off your hands now.
Yeah, then we go, yeah, and then we need to see what the head replacement will be charged back to the town, which is the next presentation.
So
yeah.
the non-invested lights, you can pretty well guess they're the older lights, so they will be coming up for replacement. Anything new based on the franchise agreement is invested. So that's why you've got a lot of invested lights, because as the city is growing, as town is growing in that, new developments and stuff, they're all going invested. Any repairs we do to a non-invested light, like end of life thing, you pay for it, but it now goes into the invested rate. And that's what Harge is saying, eventually they'll all get there.
Yeah.
So we're saying with this presentation is, put them all there now, we'll give you $250,000, and then you can wash your hands, you can budget for your lighting, because you know what exactly the cost is per month, per light.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on the first part here of this presentation? Okay.
I will mention that if the lights do become completely invested as per our franchise agreement, we start doing monthly streetlight patrols from September to April. So we will drive the community once a month to check the streetlights. And once it's an invested community, any streetlights that are reported out or noticed in the patrol, if they are not fixed within 14 days, then the community does receive a check at the end of the year based on how many days over. I think it's 2 months distribution charges for every 14 days or whatever that we haven't repaired those lights.
We get fined, kinda.
It's, yeah.
But they'll still phone me.
Pardon me?
You know, actually, once it's all set up, like within the system, we get lots of calls.
Oh, that's good.
Well, I shouldn't say, that sounds bad, we get calls.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the onus is on us to review that 14 days and write you a check, the community, if we're upset.
Well, we have enough ACTO employees in town, you would think that just on their way to work, they would catch on anything that was out. Okay.
The next presentation. So this presentation now is going to speak to the LED conversion multiplier and how it applies to the town of Veg. And we are making the assumption that we have moved all the 291 streetlights that are non-invested to the invested rate. So we're assuming all lights are invested now. Next screen. So the AUC, the Alberta Utilities Commission, approved the multiplier rate for the conversion of HPS to LED. It is available, of course, for 61B lights, which are invested. The LED conversion multiplier is applied in place of capital contribution. So instead of going to the community and charging for the heads and the labor, the multiplier is just added onto the streetlight rate. So there's no capital cost to the community to do the conversion. We do, if the community decides to go ahead, we do have to file to the AUC for approval. And the current multiplier rate is 7.96%. And we'll talk a little bit about what that multiplier rate is in the next few slides. So next slide. So how they came up with the multiplier is they took, I gotta read this because I always get it wrong. The number of lights that were available for conversion less the LED maintenance cost savings, and then they took our streetlight rate and they divided that. So basically what it is we are estimating what the annual cost to convert the lights to LED is going to be. We're anticipating the savings, which is approximately $19 per fixture per year savings in maintenance, and that's how they came up with the multiplier. So we need to recoup about $31.40 per year per light, is where the multiplier percentage comes from.
That's a one-time fee, though.
It's on your monthly bill, it's added onto your streetlight rate, and then we will talk about when it is gonna be removed, cause eventually this program will come to an end. And then if the community wishes to go to LED in the future, it would be at capital costs to the community.
Okay, just so we understand this, so this multiplier will be on the bill to the municipality every month on that, every light.
Per light,
Per light,
for a certain time period, which
yeah.
Then we'll get to that.
Yeah.
you'll see it here.
Next screen.
Per light is 291 lights or the 800?
It would actually be, right now, you have 699 that are HPS, 830 total. So I do have a breakdown of the streetlights for that. So this is just a little bit of a graph. Now, I do not know what the town of Vegs retailer rates are, so we have based this just on an average of the RRO's retailer rates. So this graph might not be truly representative of what the town pays for retailer rates. But currently, right now, you can see for an HPS light, the blue is the transmission and distribution charges, the gray is the retailer. If that light is converted to a LED, even with the multiplier, so the blue would be transmission distribution, the gray is the retailer, and the yellow is the multiplier that we recover. So annually, it's $29.70 lower on an LED head with the multiplier even included.
This is 100 watt.
HPS to a 38, yeah.
Against the LED.
Yeah, and then the higher the wattage, the better the savings as well.
And what's your recommendation gonna be, the 100-watt LED?
Pardon me?
Your recommendation is the 100-watt LED?
Well, what it is, you got 100 watt HPS.
Yeah,
That's comparing it to a 38, I think it goes to.
38 watt LED,
So then the 150 watt that's there would go to a 73,
70, yep.
okay, my memory. So then the savings are that much more on your energy,
good, good.
based
I
on that.
think it's also an opportunity to review if you think certain areas right now are not lighting enough, that you want something, you know, we're saying 100 would go to 30. If you wanted something larger because of the public presence in that area, then we're open to that when you convert.
Okay.
You don't have to stick to what we're recommending based on the law.
But if you had to add lights, if we did a light study for you and you had to add lights, then that would be a capital cost for that extra light.
Well, okay, so we definitely have had some complaints about some areas that are needing lights, or maybe we could just up the wattage on two that were closer.
You will find when you go to LED, again, the pollution we talked about, where we've done conversions, people say it's not as bright because it's not shining up their garage, it's not shining up their window, it's shining up the street light, which is what it's meant to do. So where we did have some issues, they said, well, it's not as bright as it used to be. On the street, it's as bright as it used to be, it's just not shining into their backyard.
Okay.
Those are the calls you're probably gonna get if you convert. And, you know, you can explain, we're not paying to shine up your backyard.
So basically what you're saying here, we're gonna, even with the multiplier and everything in there, we're looking at around a $30 savings per light after it's all set up and done,
On 100 watt.
on 100 watt.
For
Yep.
38. You have them all in there, don't you? The
Yep,
savings?
I do. Yeah, we can go to the next screen.
Okay,
Okay, this is all your streetlights. So I did break out what is currently non-invested, even though we're making the assumption they are invested. So you do have some lights right now that are LED, that are part of the 291. They would move to the invested rate, but any light that is currently LED, we would not put the multiplier on because it's already changed. So we don't have to touch it, we just have to move the rate. So basically, it would be 699 lights that would be converted to LED. So 445 are already invested. You have 320 that are HPS, 320 100 watt HPS, 105 150 watt HPS, and 20 250 watt HPS. And then the non-invested, I guess I should have said the total, 477, 100 watt, 192, 150 watts, and 30, 250 watt HPS right now.
So the lights that are LED already, but non-invested, they would still be eligible for the investment. They go on the invested rate, but they don't get applied the multiplier because they're already LED.
They already have the head changed, yeah.
So really, if you went back to the other slide, if you go back there real quick. Back one, please. So you see that orange top, which is the multiplier? Those lights that are already LED, okay? You'd see that savings. We don't add the multiplier onto it.
So they're non-invested already, so we already paid to have that done.
Well, what could have happened, we didn't have like the heads, we
Yeah.
having trouble, so we put them on. Where we get a lot of trouble when it's piecemeal is phone calls. Why does this light look different than that light? And it's just, isn't, the color's different, everything else, and it's the perception of the people that more or less complain in most cases. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do as far as lighting the street. It's just the aesthetics look a little weird when you got an HPS and then LED and a bunch of HPSs and LED, and I mean, it'll work. It'll all happen eventually because we're not buying HPS heads anymore. It'll happen over time, but it will be over time.
Yeah, we can go to the to the next slide again. So some of those LED ones that are on the non-invested rate at the moment, some of them, yes, the town of Egg could have paid for, but prior to 2020, we weren't charging for that, so they could have been done prior to then too, and we had just done that. So some have been for sure paid for, some have not. Next screen. So this is basically the summary of what the savings would be if you moved those 599 lights to invested and then took all those lights and moved them to LED. So the cost savings would be around $25,982 to have an LED head on an invested rate versus an HPS head on an invested rate. And this does show, so $29 per light, $43 to $44 per light, and 109. So the higher the wattage, the bigger the savings.
And that's with the multiplier in it.
Yes.
So once, we'll get to it, once the multiplier is gone, that much more savings.
And the next screen. So this is where the program is availability. We have approximately 20,000 invested street lights. The multiplier will be removed when the majority have been converted to LED. So it's not so much the multiplier is going to be removed. They'll do an estimate of how much they think is capital cost outstanding, and they will roll that amount back into the street light rate. So communities, unfortunately, that haven't participated in the conversion will be covering the cost for some of the communities that have.
Because it'll just be the one rate.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then prior to us removing the multiplier, I said we would have to get AUC approval. Next screen. I think we're done. Yep. And then is there any questions? I'm sure there'll be lots.
Chris, you have a question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering, guys, what's the benefit to ATCO for this whole program? I mean, this sounds like a pretty good deal for the municipality. Where does ATCO benefit? What's
The benefit for ATCO to go to LED is our savings in maintenance. So we're thinking we won't have to have as many guys working on the streetlights all the time, so then they can take their resources and put them in other areas.
So part of the, like with the savings and stuff, I don't know where this, carry on, I'll come back to it. I'm gonna reword it.
Okay, so when if they go to all invested, after the 67 months is up with the payment, then their profit starts going up, and then it'll cost us more to operate the lights eventually after this is all done. And in theory, they'll make more money when they go to
So the
invested.
rate is actually, that's what I was gonna say, the rate, because we've converted to LED in a lot of communities, that, what was it, $35 or whatever?
$35.59.
Yeah, that used to be $42. So we've converted throughout the province, different communities with LEDs, so our maintenance costs have gone down, so we've actually lowered that rate. The non-invested rate has actually gone up,
Yeah, I can see that happening, yeah.
so.
Yeah, just going back to the point around, O&M potentially going up for the community, right? It's roughly $4,000 a month, it was, right, the first, so that's 48 grand a year. With the multiplier, this is already 25 grand less, so you're looking at that 20,000. But at the same time, there's no capital replacement cost for that $1.7 million. So I don't know how many more months that would cover. Plus, there's no maintenance cost. So truly, we're talking about $20,000 between the two presentation difference in O&M costs that are covered off in different areas for the community. If there's any questions on that.
Well, there's obviously a lot of benefit not being the non-invested rate now with the age of the lights and stuff themselves.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can't get bulbs anymore and the multiplier's there right now, and how long is it gonna be there and stuff, so as we move forward, so there's a little bit of a balancing act to look at, but.
So another way to look at this is taking advantage of new technology now before end of life without any capital cost. Right? I mean, you could wait till all those lights need replacing at $1.7 million projected, right? Or you can take advantage of those cost savings now with a minimal extra charge with the multiplier, which by taking advantage of that technology, you've lowered your cost anyways. Now, once all this is, the big pot is all said, okay, we're to a point now we can make a rate, then it's gone and your savings are even more. That multiplier, let's say it's 10, will go down to 2, depending on what's left over, and we don't know what that is gonna be until it gets to that point. And then eventually it's all one rate, and whether you did it or not, you're gonna be paying that rate, and then you're gonna have to do it without the program.
Anybody have any questions on this up to now?
The kicker for the multiplier, we're starting to get close. It's all about our larger communities now. Starting to, and we're starting to see larger communities coming on, and that'll really help with the multiplier coming off sooner than later. So that's the hope. We're starting to get, some good news. We can't share the names, but all of that will help with removing the multiplier quicker.
So after 19,000 more streetlights, the deal will get better. Just tell us when.
I will make a mention.
And I would consider Vegreville as one of the largest.
Okay.
Yeah. The multiplier right now is at 7.96%. So when the streetlight rate goes up or down, that multiplier percentage goes up and down, the dollar value stays the same regardless of what that percentage is.
So technically, when I started doing these 5 years ago, the multiplier was lower, but the rate was higher. So now we've seen the benefits on maintenance and everything else, so the rate's gone down, but that multiplier is staying, the multiplier is fixed based on the AUC. That's why the percentage has gone up, because it's a percentage of the rate, but we still need to grab the same dollar amount.
Go ahead.
This is quite different than the presentations that we've had previously on this. Been on council long enough to see a few different versions of this, so this is almost a complete inversion of what we used to have. The altruistic, feel-good reason to change it has turned into more of a business argument, which I think is probably more appealing. I'm curious, when you talk about other communities that you've proposed this to, do we know, I'm sure that's probably public knowledge, but do you have other communities that have already made that complete switch?
City of Lloyd, Vermilion.
For my area, and some of them are smaller, so we've had Lloydminster, Vermilion, Kitscoty, Marwayne, Dewberry, Murnum has recently just signed on, Two Hills.
Paradise Valley, we're doing a presentation too.
Yeah.
North of the river is St. Paul Town, last year, Elk Point, Cold Lake hasn't signed on, but the meeting said yes, so that's a large community that would really help. decision is making more sense now than it has in the past, because of what the investment rates and all of those things, they've changed.
Yeah,
It's definitely making more sense now than it probably has 2 years.
When I first did this presentation, the 100-watt conversion was a write-off with the multiplier. So that shows where the rate has gone down, everything else. There was a write-off. If all you had was 100-watt light bulbs in your community, it really didn't make a big deal. You didn't save anything. Now you can see from there, there's a substantial saving with the multiplier. So that just shows how things have changed with our rates have come down because of the maintenance has gone down.
I know the first presentation that we seen was probably from Dave Evans and the other lady at Lloyd.
So it was like 7 years ago.
7 years ago, yeah, this is a lot better presentation when you look at the cost of the municipality and the savings and again, being that municipality that wants to be on board with, you know, being in charge of the environment and stuff, so.
And it's more like, yeah, once your lights go invested, it's easier to budget what the operational costs, because you're gonna have no unexpected costs going forward for the streetlights.
Yeah, some larger centers, even prior to LED, went to invested rates because of that, because how do you budget for $50,000 every month because some guy goes down and trashes a bunch of lights or whatever?
And I would imagine there'll be a point where ATCO would say, no, this non-invested is not good enough anymore, so like you need to redo the whole thing right from the base all the way up and.
Well, I guess that's where they're at now. Like,
Yeah.
with franchise agreements, anything new is invested.
Yeah, like, yeah, you have good communities and say, well, you have the option of invested or non-invested. Everything is invested when you guys go into community now.
And there's administration savings there as well, because, okay, we get a light get hit. Okay, now, is it you can kind of go out there and look at it and tell the difference, because they look exactly the same. So there's the administration stuff. Okay, do we bill, do we not bill? Did we miss one? Maybe.
What about the stuff downtown, Dale? Is that invested already? Those,
No, they're private lights, and so are parks as well.
Yeah.
so is there a head that we can change those to? Into LED?
For the private lights? Yeah, I didn't include any of the private lights in this presentation, but we can definitely look at those as well.
Okay, so, what does private mean over non-invested?
So there's 2 rates of a private light. There's also a private light non-invested and a private light invested. So same thing, customer pays for the private light non-invested. ATCO covers the costs on the invested. What a private light means is it doesn't light a street. So it's a parking lot, it's a park, it's somewhere that's not lighting a street,
Okay,
but is private.
Or was non-standard. Like, I think your guys' deal, that was a special order, was it
Yeah,
not? Yeah.
that's correct.
There's one in the parking lot. Right
Yeah.
behind.
yeah, and then that stuff downtown is non-standard, that's why we're calling it private?
Yeah.
Okay.
The town wanted something different than what we could provide at the time and went with that. How many spares do you have left?
I think 2 or 3.
2 or 3? Cause see, we don't supply spares for them because they're not our standard light.
Yeah,
Or we might have started 1 or 2, that's more like it.
So these lights here, or
The
that we're
fancy
running,
ones downtown.
just on the,
they would probably be a street light, just non-standard, decorative.
Yeah,
So they would probably still be on the streetlight rate,
could be.
yeah.
so those lights are not included in this right now? Any private lights not in on?
Well, those ones I'll have to double check because they are lighting a street, so I think they would be what we considered a non-standard decorative street light, but they would probably be on the streetlight rate,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, we'd have to see, cause again, they're a non-standard head.
yeah.
We don't have those heads again, right? So I'm thinking it wouldn't be included, cause it has to be based on the Cobra head that's out there now.
Yeah,
We'll
we
have to
do
look
have
into
some standard LED that we can look at, but for sure we'll get those asset numbers and I'll look into that and get back to you on those ones.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, sure.
Sorry. You had talked about doing a light inventory, and I know that some of us have brought forward concerns, and I think actually probably some of the concerns might be exactly what you highlighted. The difference, if you're driving down 50th Street, there's a sort of a hodgepodge of lights. If there is an inventory, that would be separate from this decision that we would make as council, or that is something that you would do regardless? You're going to,
Well, we know how many different lights you have, where exactly they are. I mean, we could probably show you, or just drive around, you'd see that that one's an LED and these ones aren't. I'm not sure what you're asking.
sorry, I guess maybe what I'm more asking is people concerned that they're not receiving the coverage that they should. There are some neighborhoods that have never received,
So
they have neither.
A streetlight study?
Yeah.
That would be over and above. That would be an extra cost to do a complete streetlight study in the community for the areas to see if we have enough lighting to meet TAS. I
Yeah,
believe
cause you
it is.
could leave it right where it is right now and still require that study.
Right.
Okay, what we can tell you is, if people think it's dim there now, once the LED lights come in, they might think it's worse because it's not shining against the houses and everything else.
So we know we have a couple of problem areas already that we've had complaints on. So we'll probably see less actual light there. Well, what they conceive to be light.
It
Yeah.
depends what people complain about. Dealing with this for a few years and had a situation where the guy says, the LED light you put in, it's too bright. Really? Like, that's not what it's supposed to be. So they went out and the light had somehow vibrated and was shining on his house. It was too bright. Once they turned it down, he was fine with it. You know, but for the most part, any new places, they've said it's not as bright as it used to be. You're right, in your front yard, your backyard, your side yard, it's not as bright, but on the street, it is as bright or brighter.
Go ahead, Dale.
And just for point of interest, the decorative black lights on our main street are already LED. They're an 88 watt LED light. So they're currently at that,
And who changes those?
ATCO.
Okay. Perfect. So in the invested lights that are already there, what's the schedule for ATCO? Let's say we're going ahead with this. What's the schedule in changing them all over to LED?
I'm saying approximately 6 months, because once everything is signed in the paperwork, then it has to be submitted to the AUC. And then it depends on roughly 6 months to get our inventory in. We've started ordering, actually LED heads, trying to get more in stock, so we can hopefully cut that time down. But for sure, they like to complete it in the summer, fall, spring, summer, fall. Can be done in the winter, but they try to get them done.
Go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just a couple of other questions. When you're saying people complaining about change of the light color, if I remember, we used to have mercury vapor bulbs,
Yep.
which when they went to sodium, people all said they're not as bright.
Yeah.
So I imagine we're just going through that little phase again if we change over here right now to LED.
Yeah, it's like, we have a certain standard that we have to meet on the streets.
Yeah,
As far as.
but the people's impression is what I'm saying
Oh, yeah.
is
Big time, like
we went
everyone
through
says,
that.
Oh, these LED lights are brighter.
Yeah.
Well, they may not be.
So the other question, the other question I have is you referred to CO2 reduction. The light itself isn't reducing CO2. I'm assuming that it's because it's using less energy.
Correct.
There's CO2 emissions reduction because of not producing as much electricity?
Yeah, they're a greener option.
Okay, yeah.
And actually, we'll go back to the 88 watt lights. 24 of them are already invested, 4 are non-invested. So that would be these lights.
These are invested.
They are? Okay, perfect. Like, do you have like a special mark on the ones that are invested and ones aren't?
That's the nightmare we have. The service guys go, okay, street light got hit, do we charge or do we not? There's a bit of work involved.
Yeah. So if, to move forward on this, like we make a decision, which takes us a while, I don't know if you guys ever noticed that about any level of government, but after a decision is made, you would say within 6 to 8 months, this town could be all LED.
Correct.
So to go from non-invested to invested can happen,
Yeah, if you decide to do this, the investment check probably will get sent right away. We there's discussion of whether we're gonna move the lights to the higher rate until we do the conversion. We'd still honor if it was hit and say, yes, it's a 61B, but because it's HPS and you'd be paying more, we might just wait till the conversion's done to completely start billing on the invested rate, simply because it's a higher cost.
Go
But
ahead,
the
Dale.
investment check could be sent right away.
When the programs typically start with an LED replacement for a town about our size, what do you see? It taking a summer and we'll have them changed?
Oh, to get them done?
Yeah,
Once we got all the product in that? How many lights?
845, or no, 699.
$699.
We were doing, one guy was doing, when we did Lloyd, up to 30 a day.
Okay, so it wouldn't be that long.
Get that guy over here.
When Lloyd went, it was kind of the first one, and we wanted to make sure, and he actually did very well. I mean, there's days, that you go to do some work and all of a sudden there's some issues, so he'd have to do some extra work stuff. So it averaged between 25 to 30 a day is what they were doing. Now, that all depends. We didn't do so well in downtown Lloyd. We
Traffic.
went there and everyone parked, we literally put barricades the day before, and everyone moved the barricades to the sidewalks and parked in front of all our streetlights, so that was a bit of a down day, that one.
I've
So,
seen,
you know,
I've seen that happen here.
Yes.
and depending on where they are, we need two guys who have blockers and stuff, so it varies, but we got the city of Lloyd done pretty quick.
I would say 25 to 30 working days. It's just depending on the year, sometimes you're dealing with storm season, all that stuff might be distractions, but if someone was focused on it, they would be.
Who decides what wattage the lights will be?
What's existing, so if there's 100 watt there now, we'll put on a 38, based on the comparison of the LED, HPS to LED.
Yeah.
If there's a 150 there, then it gets the 73. If it's a 250, then it gets a 106, I think.
Yeah.
So Dale, if we, let's say over by St. Anne's Manor there on that little short street there, if we were to say that, you know, there's 100 watt in there now and we would like to up that LED light, we could do that moving forward, right? Like we could, before you guys go change them, just to see if we can get some more light on the certain areas of town?
Yeah, there'd be no guarantee that you're gonna get what you want, but. I
Well,
mean,
but
it
if-
would be brighter.
Yeah,
But that can be done even after the 38 has been installed. We find we still have a dark area, we can call up and say, hey, now you're gonna take it up to the equivalent of a 150?
It'd probably be an incremental cost there. We gotta go change it again.
go ahead, Janine.
So I'm gonna go back then, study versus inventory, those are two separate things, and maybe for us and for the public, that's kind of a relevant understanding. Doing a light study to actually quantify what is there, not the amount, and not the actual number of invested versus non-invested, is something that maybe is timely too, because I don't know the last time that it's happened. It certainly hasn't happened while I'm on council. And I don't know what the cost is, the timeline, or that. So would you recommend, because in this example, we do know a couple of problem spots, but there are other places that there are no lights, and there haven't been any installed either by us or by ATCO.
I mean, you can go look at older areas and newer areas. New areas are more or less engineered to meet the specific thing. You go to your new subdivisions, I think it's every 3 lots does what it needs. You go down your older centers, there's one light a block, right? If you guys want to go there, then we would do specific light studies for the areas you want. We wouldn't do a light study for the whole town. It'd be really not very economic. But if you had certain areas where people are complaining and saying, we want to study here, we'd say, okay, we get all the data, let's say you need 4 more davits. That'd be a capital cost for you guys. It wouldn't be any part of this invested or the LED conversion. There'd be LED lights. It'd be it'd be a new ad for you, capital cost, invested light.
Okay, so in our conversations, we'll take that up. Knowing there is a few areas already, maybe we would just say right off the bat, maybe we'd like to go with a lot brighter light there to start with, instead of you put one in and then come back 3 weeks later with a brighter one.
But you may have that person where the light is saying, how come my street's so bright now? And this person still says, because they're gonna see, once you go to LED, if that person's complaining down here, they're probably gonna see it's darker there once the LED light goes in.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna shine more in the street, not out.
Okay, any other questions? because when we start having this discussion, we won't be able to phone them. Okay, well, I guess that's it. I want to thank you all, and again, thank you for what you do, especially in our community, and I want to see you around town a little more often, and make sure you treat all these local guys really good, eh?
I will, you bet, I'll be around.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having us, and feel free to call me if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Take care, Fran.
Dale's getting the information how long the other lights lasted compared to the 100,000 hours.
Yeah.
100,000, that's a lot.
RCMP and to escort out the previous.
Yeah.
Can't see through the pine box.
Okay. Everybody get back to focusing here, because we got a long meeting today, and thank you again, and we'll be reaching out to you with some more questions, I can guarantee you, so. Oh, there was one question that we were probably gonna ask, regarding some, around, in the park. We'd like to get some pricing or some information on some solar lights, like around, you. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Oh, and Karina's already reached out too. She would bring it to our ActDev meeting.
On here's good. Oh, print it, yeah.
I got one. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Mayor McPhee.
Nice to have you back.
It's nice to be back, and it's nice to be in our new facility here. It's beautiful.
We got some new backlit Vegreville sign is stainless going up here. It says Vegreville. It's really nice. It's in the back right now, getting ready to go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
It's nice to see some new faces, and welcome everybody. Thank you for having me.
Have you
in.
met Terry?
Yes.
Yeah, my wrists are sore.
Yeah, well, he's a fighter. What can we say?
Have you met Chris?
Yes, we had the opportunity to meet a couple weeks back, so welcome, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's hear what's going on in our community.
So, we've had a steady go of it recently, as usual, but I did prepare a bit of a synopsis of our 2021. I threw together some information and a few files of interest and that kind of thing I'll touch on. We have some statistics up here on the board, and I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but they do touch on our municipal versus provincial stats with some of the more prevalent issues that have come up. Overall, in 2021, we saw a total of 5,321 calls for service. That was 2,938 in the town of Vegreville and 2,383 in the provincial outlying areas. So that's up about 300 calls from 2020. Vegreville, that puts each Vegreville constable at 591 calls for 2021, or 49 calls per month that they responded to. Highest volume of calls in Vegreville were for the Mental Health Act investigations, and I think we've discussed that a few times before. We've seen significant increase in that area. We had 310 of those calls last year versus 197 from 2020, so significant increase. You know, that's probably a sign of the times as well. With COVID, we've had, I think, significant impact in people's mental health, as well as perhaps economic issues, some difficulties with employment and that kind of thing have contributed, addictions. We saw a significant uptake in that as well in the past couple of years, and so 2021, it tells that story. We had 52 break and enters reported in 2021. That's down from 64 in 2020. Mischiefs were up slightly though or significantly from 73 to 125. We saw an overall increase of 3% in property crimes in the town of Vegreville from 2020. However, that trend is down 17% on the 5-year average. We've had a substantial increase in failed to comply investigations. That's up 55% from 146 in 2020 to 226 in 2021. Now, I attribute that significantly to that increase to offenders being released continually, as well as bolstered efforts by our members to try to keep tabs on these offenders, and they've been carrying out a lot of breach files. So we see that increase because of the proactive work that's being done. A few files of interest. November 11th, we had a drug trafficking investigation, extensive background investigation in the local drug trafficking trade. Members executed a search warrant at a Vegreville residence. As a result, 4 Vegreville adults were charged with offenses including possession and trafficking of controlled substances, possession of stolen property, and failure to comply with release orders. And this is just one of probably several dozens of these that we had in the last year in 2021. We had a manslaughter investigation on April 3rd. VEG members responded to a disturbance at a Vegreville residence. Upon arrival, discovered 2 males had been involved in an altercation. One of the males was unresponsive. Despite attempts to revive the unresponsive male, he did not survive. RCP Major Crimes and other support units attended to assist, and the investigation resulted in charges of manslaughter against a 36-year-old Vegreville male. Drug trafficking and assault police officer. On February the 3rd, 2021, members responded to a report of a suspicious male laying in the snow. Members found a 19-year-old man on the ground, and he appeared to be in distress. When members tried to help the man, he became combative and fought. He was arrested and taken into custody, and during his search, members located and seized weapons and a significant amount of methamphetamine. The male has been charged with assault and possession for purpose of the trafficking. Break and enter. October 30th, Vegreville members responded to a B&E at a Vegreville business. Upon arrival, members learned the business owner had found an intoxicated male inside sleeping on the floor. Investigators found the male learned that he had broken a window, entered, and then proceeded to make himself a sandwich before going to sleep. And that's not the first time I've seen that in my career. I've actually seen that more than a few, where they stop in and grab something to eat and then go to sleep. He was arrested, given a safe place to sober up, and he was released on charges for mischief and break and enter. Crime prevention initiatives. Our habitual offender management, as I mentioned earlier, the members are continuing to monitor our offenders who are habitual offenders in the community that are on court-imposed conditions. There are currently 9 on the list. However, that number, it varies dramatically from month to month, sometimes depending on who's in custody at the moment and who's been released. But we will continue to do that. Schools and community meetings have gradually increased with the reduction of pandemic restrictions. Thankfully, the members are able to get back out into the schools and speak with teachers and students again. Liaison members are identified for each school and have been making regular visits and consultations, and we'll continue that with society getting back into the norm here with conditions being lifted, so we're grateful for that. Feedback with community groups and meetings. We've had 2 virtual town halls, one in November and one in February. These were both done online on the Teams platform, and we invited general public and public officials to attend and discuss bring up any concerns they might have. This last meeting, I also had an aim to try to solicit input for those priorities out there that residents and our elected officials might have that they'd like to see us implement into our performance plan. So every year at this time of year, as most of you know, we prepare our annual performance plan, and we're wondering if there have been certain issues that might be brought up in the community that we would like, or they would like addressed more robustly, and if that is the case, I'll add them potentially to our performance plan. Generally, there'll be 3 areas that we look at bolstering. Last year's priorities were crime reduction with targeting property crimes and drug trafficking, mental health, and traffic safety. And, you know, I would certainly appreciate any input that any of you might have in this area. And going forward, I can try to move that into our plan as well. Other significant issues, all 8 municipal regular member positions are currently filled. However, we will see a turnover of 1 position in April. Constable Julia Sabro has been posted to Vegreville for under 4 years, just under 4 years, and he's in the process of transferring. And his replacement has been named. We'll get a recruit who's due to arrive at the end of the March. So we've been fortunate in the last few years. Our recruits that have been coming have been turning out quite well, and we're quite happy with what we're seeing coming out of Depot now. So I've spoken with our new recruit coming, and he seems to have a great attitude, and he's looking forward to coming to Vegreville. So we'll see him here in a few weeks.
But do you feel sometimes that having all these recruits here, that it sort of takes away from the policing because they're not seasoned members? I mean, we have been constantly getting recruits here.
Yeah, we do have a fairly junior membership, but I don't think that's unique to Vegreville. I think most attachments are that way. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. Yes, you may lose some of the experience, which is extremely valuable, but you do at times gain enthusiasm if you have the right younger members that are coming in. And as I mentioned, we've been fortunate. We have been lucky as well because we've seen a couple of seasoned members transfer in the last year and a half. Constable Anita Doctor, Constable Dane McCarty, you know, they've both got in the area 15 years. And so we've been fortunate in that regard. But we have seen 3 or 4 new recruits in the past couple of years as well. So
well, it's nice that there's senior people coming in and out too. I mean, everybody's got to start someplace, right?
yeah, that's right. Vegreville's a good place to learn because we're busy, but the pace is not, you know, so overrun that you can't take the time to do some teaching, right? And you still see all kinds of work here, whereas some detachments, you may not see that. My first posting, really, it was in a northern village in Saskatchewan, and really, I didn't know how to write a ticket when I got out of there. I just learned, you know, basically how to deal with intoxicated persons and assaults and major criminal offenses. Where here, our young members, they see the full gamut. They get a chance to do all criminal code work, traffic services, drug work, you know, anything and everything, even financial crimes. So
it's not just here. Your feeling is that a lot of other detachments in the province that are on municipal funded detachment are seeing the same thing? There's a lot of recruits are showing up there, or?
I don't know necessarily that I would say specifically just municipally funded detachments, no. I mean, I don't know that overall we're seeing members stick around for 30 or 35 years as much as we used to anymore. Typically, you know, we're seeing a lot of members retire at 25 years now. And, you know, sometimes those senior members, they do tend to pit in some of the more central locations in and around the cities, and you know, staffing I'm sure that's a challenge for them to move those members around. But
is there a requirement they have to move on after so many years, some of them, or can they stay here if they really choose?
well, eventually, yes. I mean, staffing has a bit of a negotiation process there, and if they want to advance their career, sometimes there's movement that needs to happen. There's a number of variables there, especially if they want to promote. I mean, it's quite often you have to move if you want to promote, right? So it would be nice to have members here, and we do have some here long term. You know, we've got one constable that's been here for 6 years, and I mean, he's the one that's been here the longest. But we've lost a few in the last couple of years that were, you know, here for 4 or 5 years.
Just the community is always asking me.
Yeah.
Like, we got somebody new, they look young, and I know that we do get quite a few recruits that come through here lately. I'd say in the last 6 years, there just seems to be more than the seasoned officers. But
I think the argument would also be made that sometimes those attrition rates, especially in smaller communities, is necessary. And that can be due to I mean, let's face it, we're in a confrontational business. That's what we do. We deal with conflict. And when you deal with conflict day in and day out, it wears on you. But it also has an impact. When you're out in the community, you constantly see these people that you've had to deal with, and sometimes on a difficult basis, you go to Walmart to get groceries, and there's the person that you arrested yesterday, and it happens all the time. And it has a really significant impact on the quality of life for the members that are here. And sometimes that's why you might not see the members staying in a community, a smaller community, for many years. After 4 or 5 years, you've arrested a lot of the people that or dealt with some people on a negative basis, and it may just be the nature of the call. You go to a domestic violence complaint, and we all, in our own personal lives, have difficult times sometimes. And whether they're in the right or the wrong, it's a negatively charged atmosphere that you're dealing with, and there's emotions there, and it really puts you kind of in that forefront of that person where you see him in a business, somewhere down the road, and it can have an impact on that interaction, right? So.
Well said. I mean, that's a point that most people never think about too, right? Is that every day when they're not on duty and how things roll for them, so.
I would like to stay in one community for many years, and it's a little different for me because I don't have to see as many people on a first-hand basis as some of the constables do, but in other manners maybe. But it does create some difficulties sometimes.
Okay. Carry on, or does anybody else have anything we know on what he's brought up so far?
Sure.
So that we've seen a reduction in theft, personal crime, so.
Absolutely. I'm going to get onto a couple of stats here shortly, and I won't beat them to death, but I will touch on them. As I mentioned, all 8 municipal positions are full. All 4 provincial positions are full here as well, and they assist in the town all the time. We've got a couple of losses coming to our office here. Our senior public servant, Colleen Weeder, is due to retire after more than 41 years of exemplary service with the RCMP. And I understand she was also with the town for a year or 2 before that. So it's been a long-standing relationship with the town and the RCMP. The old office, which we're in right now, Colleen worked in that office originally for nearly 40 years.
She's a set right over there?
That's right. So we're, I'm really happy that, she's moving on to that next chapter, but she's going to be greatly missed. And, but that's how it goes. We're currently working on interviews to fill that position, and we'll have somebody in there hopefully in the next month or so. But that being said, it'll be a farewell for Colleen coming shortly. We've also got a municipal employee, Corey Waiwadniesti, who is going to be moving along to pursue other opportunities as well after 9 years in our office, and so we're also sad to see her go. That's going to be a great loss as well for our office, but sometimes we need to move on, and other opportunities come along. So we've fortunately also recently had some additions to our Vegreville Victim Services office. We've got 3 new volunteer advocates who've come forward, and they'll be looking to work with our clients very shortly. Security clearances have all come through, and they're just completing some training, and so they'll be able to come out and help us in some of those difficult situations, and they are huge assets. If we're dealing with a fatal collision, for example, or a sudden death where there's family members involved, often we're tasked with dealing with the investigation or securing the scene, dealing with traffic control, whatever the case may be, and they can be our lifeline for those clients that are really struggling through that. And as well, follow up with court, victim services applications for victims of crime and that kind of thing. They're very valuable. They will help sometimes with applications for emergency protection orders and that sort of thing. So we're really happy to see that unit being bolstered, and our victim services manager is doing an exceptional job in that way. So really happy to see that coming.
Are these volunteers in town?
They're local.
Okay.
Yes, fortunately, yes. So if we have something happening here in town, they're out quite quickly and able to help us out I've been on those scenes where it's really emotionally charged, and to have somebody there just to help out is a huge asset, so.
So the manager of victim services, it doesn't live in our community.
No, Melissa is living out in the Viking area.
Yeah.
However, she commutes and she's quite quickly able to get in.
But to have these volunteers in our community that can get to the scene as quickly as,
That's right.
okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be helpful. So I have some brief stats that have been brought forward by our strategy branch. Within the town of Vegreville, these are the crime gauges in a nutshell. Our persons crimes overall, we've seen a 13% decrease in 2021 from 2020. However, we have seen a 3% increase, as I mentioned earlier, overall in property crimes. You're gonna see the number 51% on other criminal code. Don't be alarmed by that. That one specifically speaks to the breaches, a lot of the breaches that the members have been actioning for those people who are out in the community on conditions, on court-imposed conditions. That's where the lion's share of that stat is coming from. Specific property crimes going downward, 19% decrease in break and enters in 2021, 9% decrease in theft of motor vehicles, and a 1% decrease in theft unders. So, I mean, those two last numbers, they don't seem really significant, but they're trending the right way. So our goal is to keep trending that way in the year to come, so.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
What do you think, or do you have any insight on the cause of the 51% of the breach of conditions? What's causing people to just say, I don't care, and just go ahead and break their?
Well, I attribute that to a significant number of the crimes, especially the property crimes out there, are a handful of people, you know, and people that typically aren't really inclined to follow court-imposed conditions in the first place. And there's been a trend in the last couple of years that incarceration is not something that Alberta Justice seems inclined to be pushing at the moment, and there's other reasons, I'm sure, financial, overcrowding in the jail system. I'm all for rehabilitation, and I think I've expressed that to council before, for those offenders who want to be rehabilitated and who really want to be valuable members and contributing members of society. However, there is a handful of people out there who just have no interest in doing that. They're going to continue breaking the law. And so those are the folks that we are trying to keep tabs on. The courts, you know, will release these people on conditions, whether they be curfew or no contact orders or abstain from drinking. And what we do is we check on them to make sure they're abiding by those conditions and not drinking, that kind of thing. Because if we don't, those conditions really, I don't believe, are worth having on paper if we aren't out checking on them, right? So I think that that's significantly why we're seeing that number.
Oh, thanks, that's a good answer.
Absolutely, thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Boyle.
So it is about that same number again. Do you happen to have a breakdown of the 51% when we're talking about breach, whether the majority of the time that you're dealing with those is within the limits, town limits from Vegreville versus times that they would be breaches for those outside of the town?
These stats specifically are all within Vegreville.
All within, okay.
Yes, this sheet here. I've got a separate one that outlines the provincial offenses as well, but yes, this is a breakdown right in town.
Well, I think it's worth noting is that they're up 50 to the numbers because when the constables know that they're around, they know they're in breach of their already, and they know they're going to be doing something tonight. So if they hear that they're in town, they'll go and then arrest them again in breach or breaking the rules of their probation or whatever they're doing. They have to go to jail, and eventually, if they show enough times, the judge has to do something.
Exactly.
So, well, okay. So, but I mean, if the officer himself hears during the day that so and so is in town. Well, we already know that he has failures to appear. Let's go just run by, see what he's doing, grab him, get him, because we know he's probably going to be doing later.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'd like to see that number goes up because that actually is an effective policing a model there by catching them when they're sitting around doing it. Well, they're sitting around in breach what they should be doing, but
Speaks to prevention as well.
it does,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And our members, they know most of these clients and they know which conditions they're on without, even having to check because they deal with them so often, right? So that speaks to what we were talking about earlier, is it's nice to have people that are familiar with the community. And, I do definitely recognize the value to having people in our community for extended periods of time as well. So, fortunately, it doesn't take too long to get to know them. So.
Right.
Clients, we used to call them something different, criminals, but.
I like that word, I caught that one.
I've gone on to provide a bit of information as far as file counts. And overall, our pros files, we have seen an increase since 2017, gradually each year, right up to 2021 now. So we're up to just shy of 3,000 files per year. And that is an increase that we're seeing. But you've got to remember, every time we do a proactive file, that's an increase as well. So statistics, I guess, depends on how you view it. Like you had said, Mr. Mayor, is when we breach someone, that's a good thing. It's showing that the proactive work is being done. So, but it does give you a bit of an idea about the workload that the members are taking on. I'm not going to get into every specifics.
Yeah, I'd like to bring something up just for council to understand here.
Absolutely.
When we get to the file count, the file count is what determines how many officers we have charged to our detachment. So it gets to the point, I know we've had conversations with the higher ups and stuff about this and what determines how many officers are required in our municipality, so this is key.
Yeah.
And again, if 37% of those files are actually working around 12 people, I mean, it gets to the point where, the taxpayers of Vegreville are gonna have to pay for another officer because of the file counts are gonna be where they're at. So, I mean, I don't know what we do to help this. We lobby the province for more jails and more Crown prosecutors, I guess.
Well, I mean, they have informed us of the shortages with prosecutors. We know that there's, I believe, 80 to 100 prosecutors short at the moment in the province, and I don't know where they're at with trying to fill those positions. I know that there's a shortage of judges as well. I know that the jails are overcrowded, and they're trying to mitigate that issue. But I guess the flip side of that is, do we have these people in the community and just try to deal with the problems that are created? Because it just creates more and more work, and like you said, more resources are required to try to address it.
Well, so if the file count keeps going up and we get another officer, we're looking at it like a 2.5% property tax increase to cover the cost of another officer. Yeah. So again, the province, by doing nothing, is just more downloading onto us.
That's
so
a balanced budget.
Yeah.
What's that?
I thought their last budget was in the black.
We'll see. We need to lobby. All municipalities need to lobby because it's just not working very well.
The pros files do speak to a significant part of it, but there is more that the operations strategy branch does incorporate into their analysis, and it's some of it is beyond me even, but the types of files, the times during the week that members are responding to these files, they do a full analysis, and how they come up with these numbers is quite complex. It's actually not just as simple as how many files, but that is a big part of it. So
we would have no say in it.
Well, I mean, that's something that has to be addressed at the executive level, but
well, I know from the conversations we've had, and,
Yeah.
and I know it's a complex formula they put together
Yeah.
when they determine, but as we would have no say whatsoever. It's too bad, but I'm not here to grill you, that, Terry.
I know, absolutely.
Okay, good.
Thank you. I've gone into a little bit about the workload, a little bit more detail of the types of workload that we're seeing in the last year. And I've mentioned before, our Mental Health Act files have exploded, and these two charts explain that. And again, this is an area that really we are the first to respond to that. However, people with mental health issues, that's not a police issue in and of itself. We have minimal training in that area. However, we have a lot of experience in dealing with people having trauma, mental health issues. But ultimately, to help these people in the long term is what the goal should be. And that needs to involve doctors, that needs to involve psychologists, that needs to involve other resources, social services, perhaps addictions counseling, perhaps there's financial issues there. And we're kind of the Band-Aid. You know, we go out and we respond, and we'll get these people calmed down and try to deal with the initial response and make sure they're not harming anybody else. But there needs to be, I think, more resources brought in from other areas, and specifically healthcare, in my opinion. And I know that there is a trial run going on within our district to have, it's called RPACT, and that's a police and counseling team. And we have, I believe, 2 of those being set up. One is being set up for Wainwright, and one in Fort McMurray. I'm not 100% sure. But I'm hoping the results of that will be successful, and at some point down the road, we may see a team like that here. Because I believe that that is an aspect of this that we need to help out. When you look at the numbers, it's a significant amount of time and effort that's being put into these Mental Health Act issues.
You have a comment?
Yeah, I did have a question. I've heard about the program in Wainwright, and it's very similar to some of the statistics that I've shared before in Camrose, that almost 60% of their calls are actually non-police related calls. And I think you've demonstrated that you might be the emergency response, but you're not equipped to do the triage for the people that actually need the help. And it might be a diverse team that needs to help them. My question is, if we've had an increase of 12.09% in Mental Health Act, is this an increase due to multiple repeat calls by the same people? I mean, we're talking about a different subsect with a diversity of issues potentially. But are these the same people, or are these new people recalling? So I guess my query is that number generated by one person calling repeatedly, or this is multiple new people that are creating that statistic?
I would say both. You are correct in that thinking, though, is we do have a number of people, you know, whether it be 15 to 20 people within the community that do call in regularly, or we have issues to address with regularly. You know, I can think of 8 or 10 names that we deal with regularly of people who are having difficulties with their mental health, and as a result, we're called. That being said, there are times when people are just struggling in general, and I think all of us do at times. But you are right, a significant portion of this is probably a smaller number of individuals. Yeah.
And I know that Councillor Warwell and myself have brought this up with the Solicitor General about the costs, what it costs this municipality to find a place for them after they've been arrested. They don't deserve to be in jail.
Yeah.
So then we have to find either St. Paul or Athabasca or Pinoca. We have to transport them there on our dime. And it should be more of a health issue. Councillor Barry?
No, thank you. I think part of you're speaking workload, which means that some of those, like the mental health, take up more of your time than a traffic act. So if you take a look at manslaughter without a firearm, I'm assuming that that's a file that took a lot of hours to handle, probably just one person.
That's correct.
So I mean, like, that's the aspect, is that those mental health ones tie up your constable or whatever, your workforce, a lot more than just pulling somebody over for a traffic offense.
Exactly. One mental health call can take hours and hours.
Yeah.
Especially if we end up having to transport, and we don't always have to go that route. We have a good relationship with Covenant Health and with you know, the local doctors that are manning the emergency center, and when we need somebody assessed, they're quite helpful and willing. But if the client is violent or they're not logical, if they're causing problems, we have to ultimately deal with them because we're not going to allow EMS or the doctors to be, in that place where they're having to defend themselves. However, if it's a client that's just simply depressed or, having thoughts of suicide or what the case is, at times the health region or EMS is willing to take them under their wing and take the transport as well. Sometimes that does happen, but it has to be an assessment on an individual basis, an individual case. But you're absolutely right. The reason those numbers are so high is because those mental health act calls can take a long time.
And that's something I think that we're going to have to really continue our advocacy going forward, because once again, what I'm seeing is, and this is, I appreciate the stat, but what we're seeing is stuff that is supposed to fall under health, which is actually not our responsibility, is a municipal responsibility. So what we're seeing is, in a way, I feel like we're paying for it multiple times for the same health, because we're paying for the officer's time here, we're paying for it there instead of it being dealt with, and we're also paying for it sometimes 3 and 4 times because it's our support services like our FCSS and whatnot that's as well assisting with them. So I think that, looking at the right people dealing with that issue is going to be a huge thing. And another thing that raised concern there too is, again, His Worship mentioned, I was in the meeting with the Justice Minister, and we pushed back on a couple of these things, and unless I'm mistaken, the Justice Minister told us that there wasn't a problem with overcrowding. Because I remember noting that, saying, well, oh no, that's not the problem, and it's switching off. So, I think we're going to end up needing to, once again, be pushing the advocacy for the province to be dealing with the provincial part of it, essentially.
Well, we gotta do something. I mean, there's no way that we can expect police officers to be mental health experts, and we can't expect the addiction problem to go away if there's not enough help for them. I mean, we can probably take 1/3 of these calls out of here if we didn't have the addiction problems that we do in this town and stuff. So overall, there needs to be a new approach, and we all need to lobby. We need to lobby the province and see that we can't change the way that this stuff is dealt with, because if they don't get to the problem early, it just gets worse. And I mean, I feel bad for you guys at times too. You guys can't even do your job because you got 2 or 3 officers tied up because someone's violent or they could hurt themselves. And then really, like some counseling a week earlier probably would have avoided this situation. So I don't know what the answer is. I mean, as elected officials, all we can do is lobby the provincial government to try to make some changes that'll make things better for everybody. So, and tomorrow is a good time to do it.
But we'll continue on the front lines to, try to help these individuals, and that's the message I try to convey to to the members, is that if there's somebody out there that's struggling with mental health or addictions issues, let's try to help them. And if they need to get sober first, fine, let's get them sober. But then let's try to get them out to talk with someone. Let's see if we can get them to a professional. Let's see if we can convince them to get to a meeting or do what they need to do to try to better themselves rather than continue down that road. So hopefully they'll move forward with that. A few other stats here that I have brought forward, but I'll move on. The last couple of pages are specific stats, and I'm not going to get into each of them, but they do overlay the 5-year percentages and changes in numbers specifically for each of the categories. And you're welcome to peruse those at your leisure, and if you have any questions or concerns, by all means, call me at any time. I've highlighted some of the significant ones that we've seen, but anything further you'd like to ask me on, please just feel free. You will notice the drug trafficking. That's one that I have brought forward that we are working on significantly, because I do think that contributes to a lot of our other outlying issues, and we'll continue on that one. And our members have been doing a really good job on that. Our last page I included because it does include more recent stats of our response times in the town of Vegreville. And you'll note that nearly 55% of our calls our members are at in under 10 minutes in Vegreville. 75% in under 15 minutes our members will respond to. These are priority 1 and 2 calls. So serious calls where somebody may be in danger at that moment, they'll be there even quicker. But if it's something that requires a response immediately, our members are typically there within 15 minutes. And I think that's comparable or quicker to the provincial municipal response times. And to be honest, I think that that's something that is unique in smaller communities that are policed. I don't know that you're gonna see that response time in some of the cities, because I've been out for ride-alongs in some of the bigger cities, and they'll have 5, 6, 8 calls backed up in the queue, and, you know, it may be an hour till they get to some of them, right? So fortunately here, members, there's typically always somebody available, ready to get to a call in the town of Vegreville, and, you know, they'll be here at your place if it's a priority very quickly, so. Any questions on that?
Oh, looks pretty good.
I want to thank you all very much for the chance to come out and speak with you today. It's been a little bit before seeing you all in person, so it's great.
Well, thank you, Terry, for what you do, and let the staff know too that we appreciate everything they do every day to make this community a safer place to live, and got some changes coming with front-end staff, and I mean, someone's been there as long as Colleen for one, and I mean, it's gonna be hard to replace somebody like her, and I'll just like to say on behalf of the council and myself that we wish Colleen all the best, and I hope she gets some fishing in.
Thank you. I will pass that along.
Excellent. Anybody else? Any other questions before Terry's done?
So if there's one thing you could ask of the community that the community can do to help you, just by without thinking, what would it be?
Talk to us. Talk to us.
Awesome, perfect.
Give us a call. Stop by.
I'll give you a call, Terry.
Careful what you ask for there. Rewind.
Or perhaps better reconsider that. Thank you very much.
See you, bud.
Thank you.
So how we doing on time here? Oh, we're flying right along.
Good.
Does anybody want to take a break?
Yeah, sure.
Can we say we can shut down for 5 minutes? Phil, you ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll get back at her.
I'm going to